Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to highintensitybusiness.com. This is episode 275, and we're going to be talking about online coaching and specifically behavioral change. I'm here with Tim Drummond. Super chuffed to have Tim on the podcast. Tim is a renowned leader in the coaching, fitness, and personal development space, known particularly for helping experts in the fitness industry build online coaching businesses. He first came to prominence in the fitness industry, establishing himself as a best-selling author, having penned 2 books, coined Coach to the A-List. And while working with the Hollywood elite, he was featured in Hello Magazine, Huffington Post, Sunday Times, and went on to become one of the UK's best-paid personal trainers. Currently residing in the sunny Mediterranean island of Malta, which I'm very jealous about. Over the past 5 years, he's been traveling the world, having built multiple successful online coaching businesses himself, only needing a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection, which I'm sure is the envy of many. He now helps coaches build financial, successful online businesses for themselves. Learning, but also doing, has led to a life of financial success, earning him more than he needs, happiness, and he wants to be a positive influence on the world around him. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, man. 275, did you say?
Yeah, that's right. We've been busy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, great to have you on the show. Been a fan of yours for some time. I actually first came across you through, I think, a mutual friend of ours, Gary Knight.
Yep.
Who's been on my podcast a couple times. Gary was a big fan of yours and would kind of point you out as the go-to person for really the online coaching space. And I then went on to read your ebook, The Prosperous Personal Trainer, which I loved and shared everywhere. I thought it was great. And found it to be very just useful in terms of helping me understand how to coach people more effectively. And as I'm sure you've heard this tons, like it just reframes the way I think people in the fitness industry think about this business and what can be achieved. So I guess, what I'm interested in doing in this podcast, as we were kind of talking about before we got started, is I have a lot of listeners and also clients who train people in person through personal training and do a bit of online coaching, or maybe there are some who actually want to completely focus on the online. And I loved your podcast on Remote Fit Pro, and I will link to the podcast you did with those guys. I think that was quite recently, which is fantastic in terms of understanding your background and some of the other stuff that we might not get into, such as pricing and things like that. And we might touch on some of this stuff. But yeah, excited to just get into behavioral change specifically. But obviously we have license to deviate and go on tangents. That's what podcasts are all about. Yeah. And so I figured I'd first ask you, why Malta? You can see in the background there, you've got this gorgeous view of a hotel in the ocean. Why did you decide to move to Malta and operate from there?
Yeah, nice. Like a few years back, I left the gym. I'd kind of want to say, like, a lot of this is like the business, the online, the freedom, that kind of stuff. But, I was a personal trainer in the trenches for like 6, 7, 8 years. And I loved the job. I loved doing it. It did everything that I wanted it to do at the time. I spent a lot of money learning from really good people about how to be a good personal trainer. Like a lot of the stuff that is the marketing blurb, let's be honest. A lot of it was based on being really good, like being good at being a personal trainer. First of all, a lot of it, this was back in the day, so we can all have opinions now, but there's a lot of Poliquin stuff I did. I did a lot of movement stuff with some guys in the States, did a lot of nutrition and quite deep functional medicine stuff. And then I started getting into the behavior change, and that was partly just because I wanted to get better, like actual results with my clients. So that kind of led me to a place where I still loved training clients in person. I still loved doing it. And I really enjoyed learning about how the motorbike goes past. I really enjoyed actually learning from some really good strength coaches. And then I think what changed a little bit is that I started focusing more on sort of general population. And it's not that I didn't in the gym when I was a personal trainer, but it was more that, I did want to build a bigger business. I did want to do something more than just, 40 hours in the gym. And I kind of realized that was, to be honest, at first it was like, that's where the business is. But then I started getting into, at first it was just like habit change stuff, like some simple books like Switch and stuff like that. Then I just started like actually using it with my clients, like normal personal training clients. I was like, shit, this makes a difference. They're actually doing what I've asked them to do outside the gym. It's like, wow. And then at one point I just went, right, that's what I'm going to do. And I stopped doing in person. And then I was kind of, to be honest, living in London. And then one day I just realized, like, I'm paying London prices. I'm living in a London apartment. I'm spending London money, and I could be anywhere. Like, and part of it was also, I could be anywhere. Like, and I lived in France, in Italy. I lived in Spain the year before, more just like over the winter. And then I was just like, right, I'm going to do it properly. Malta's, it's amazingly beautiful. The language helps, like they're English. It's a good place to run a business. It's very business friendly as well. Especially if you've got an online business, you can be anywhere. So, you could set your business up in Malta as opposed to in the UK. So it was a combination of factors. Sun, it's like 10 months of the year it's sunny. I like the Maltese people, although I didn't know that when I came out here. I guess it was just like I didn't want to be in London anymore, and I didn't need to be. Like most, I don't know. And again, if I ran a fitness business, when I decided that I wanted to charge a lot, I had to gravitate towards Belgravia, Mayfair very specifically. And then when I stopped needing that, eventually I was just like, right, I'm going to go and live by the beach.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Is it, I'm guessing there's probably tax advantages as well as, you said there's sort of a growing...
It's a good place to run a business from. Yeah. They Ireland is a better place to run a business from than the UK as far as, lots of rules go, especially if you've got a company. So it is advantageous to be here in Malta. Yeah. No doubt. But again, it wasn't just that. It was just a combination of things.
Cool. Awesome. That's super interesting. And I'm really keen, obviously, to dig into the behavioral change side of things. And I figured we would just kind of set the scene. Do you want to just talk briefly about, why you decided to focus on behavioral change as a coach in terms of trying to drive results for your clients?
Yeah. I look back now, and it's quite easy to sort of paint this magical picture of why you discovered this stuff. But it kind of just happened bit by bit. And I think at first it was just like there's a book called Chimp Paradox, there's book Switch. I just started reading that, and a little bit, I could kind of sit back now and think, well, my clients didn't do what I said. I got frustrated. I did. Like, that all happened. I think one thing that stood out for me, I remember I got like 2 clients, and they both wanted weight loss. That's what they were after. And one of them, like, literally just done everything that I said. Like, in 9 weeks, she lost 2 dress sizes. And they were like, it was almost like they were the same people. Like, they were the same age. They both were lawyers. They both wanted the same outcome. They were women. They wanted, they were size 16. They both wanted to get size 12. And one day I was doing a leg press with the other client, and she just started, basically, I want to say moaning, because it's probably a bit unfair, but she was basically saying, why aren't I getting the result? And at the time, I just remember back, and I was just like, what am I not doing? Like, I kind of, the language I always use now is I kind of internalized it. Oh, what am I not doing right? What? I was like, this other woman was doing amazing. And I think I got to a part where I knew enough to know that I was good, that I did know what to tell people to do, because this woman was doing amazing. And I probably got a little bit, in some parts, cocky. But then I think luckily it sort of hit me in the face one day. I was like, if I think I'm so good at program design and nutrition and giving people this advice because this woman got great results, like, do I not have to also take responsibility for the one that's not doing fuck all? As opposed to, well, it's just not my fault, they're not doing it. And I just started reading just simple I don't even know if you'd probably call it personal development as much as anything else. It's like Switch is about habits and incorporating them, simple stuff about like conscious, subconscious mind, like, you know, and at first it was just really simple stuff that I would do with my clients. And then I guess over the space of like 5 or 6 years, it sort of fed into itself. So then I really started reading about things like self-sabotage. And I had a conversation with one of my clients once, and she just said something that made absolute no sense to me, that she was on purposely eating too much because she didn't feel that she could go below a certain weight. And I got her to that place because I was actually getting better at asking good questions and creating like a coaching environment. And I'd read this stuff that people sabotage and all that. And we probably know it about business. We probably all, like as business owners, maybe read some of that. And just having her sit there and tell me, like, it was almost like she described that she had this band that when she got too heavy, she had to do something about it. So she hired another personal trainer. I was about the 7th one. But she'd get to one weight and she couldn't go below that. And so she said she really liked the training with me. So she really wanted to keep doing that. And so she had been eating more food for the last month. And I was just like, what the hell is that? Like, and again, not out of judgment, just a bit like, that's mental. And then I think I was hooked. And then I was like, if that's how people's minds work, if I want to get results with like the majority of my clients, not just like the ones that happen to do everything I say, which that's the easy part. They're the guys that, you know, that come in and it's like, you don't have, I realized in a way, you just have to get out of their way more than anything else. You do need to give them great programs, but it's like, here's the great program and move out the way and they'll make it fucking work. Whereas a lot of people aren't necessarily like that. They, again, like look at her. So that was kind of took me up to a few years ago. And then I think it was just like, more I did it, the more I learned, the more I taught this stuff, the more when you teach stuff, you have to really understand it. Started taking a lot of all the sort of stuff I'd learned from lots of different places and actually like putting it in a system that then because I had to be able to teach this stuff to people that I work with and I mentor. I think that the final thing was like seeing my clients use it with their clients and then actually it making a difference and sometimes incredibly quickly as well.
So no, that's great. There's a few things I want to probe on what you said there. Firstly, you know, the woman who was getting in her own way in terms of you know, not being able to get below a certain weight. You know, when you dug a bit deeper, which I'm guessing you did, what was the core issue there, and how did you help her achieve her goal in the end, or what happened there?
So there's obviously like some client confidentiality, and specifically in this case, and probably the reason why it stood out so much is eventually, and this is very rare, by the way, this doesn't happen often. It just happened to be one thing that really stood out in my head. She did tell me why. And I was like, okay. And we had a sit down and we also agreed that she needed to get some separate help because of why she was like this. But I think what it made me realize is that, okay, it might not be quite as sort of big as what she told me, but it can be down to sort of like your parents like telling you that you should always finish your plate, and again, like, I'm not sure if I say as a guy or someone who's just into like strength training and learning this stuff and very rational, and it's like, well, just go and do it. You do realize that actually, not only for people that don't follow what you do, but for performance as well, like real performance, there's two sides there of like getting people moving from wherever they are to almost their best performance. And so with her, it was a bit of an eye opener. But then I had other clients that just realized, like, even just as simple as, which sounds obvious, it's like I eat at the end of the week because I drink too much on a Friday night because I'm stressed from work. And then that just sort of cascades into a weekend of binging. They're just sometimes not even aware that that's the problem. And like, what personal trainers tend to do is we try to fix it at a very rational level. It's like, well, just don't drink too much. Yeah, try that. See how many times that works. Like, I used to like get annoyed with my clients because they wouldn't wake up in the morning and prepare their breakfast. I'd tell them more and more and more, and I'd just keep telling them stuff. And eventually I was like, this isn't working. And that, I think some simple stuff like just asking questions. I mean, that's kind of, I don't want to jump too far on, but like I did organizational change when I was at university. And a lot of what they said is when you go into a company and try and change culture, you don't just go in there and tell everyone what to do. You go in, you have a conversation with everyone that's involved in the change, you get their perspective of what's happening, and then you look at what's the goals that you want to get to together. And then you actually say to them, how can we do this together? How you know better than I do as the people that work in this company. And it all kind of came flooding back to me when I started doing this with clients. I was like, oh my, same shit. So these guys are the best at things like organizational change. I'm like, it's the same thing. So, yeah.
So yeah, it's like you say, it's asking the right questions so they come up with the solutions themselves. No, that is really interesting. You know, I'm just thinking. I know people might be listening to this thinking, well, what kind of questions do you ask to get to that core issue? Is that something that you can elaborate on in terms of the way you would ask those questions to try and really get to the crux of why someone isn't doing what you're asking them to do?
Yeah, definitely. So one of we teach at the beginning of the internship, my program, we teach like some principles of coaching. It's like questions of the answers. A lot of trainers don't realize that, and I wouldn't have known, it's like, instead of telling someone what to do, just phrase it as a question. Even that on its own is something that was totally foreign to me. So like when a client asked me like, what's the best thing for breakfast? My brain as a personal trainer is like, tell them all the stuff I've learned. And my business partner, Phil, he says something around, it's better to be effective than right. And so
I love that.
Yeah, and I'd be like, I remember like saying all this stuff to these female clients, like meat and nuts for breakfast and the Poliquin thing. And I was just like, now I look back and I was like, oh my God, no wonder they didn't do it. So I would just turn around and say, well, what do you think? What do you think is the best thing that you could eat for breakfast? Because for the vast majority of clients, and this includes like performance clients and all that stuff, they probably know 90% of what they need to know. And you need to just fill in the blanks. If they say something stupid, then again, you don't make them feel stupid. It's like, oh, and they say, I don't know, let's say they said, oh, I should have Special K. It's like, oh, have you ever heard about like the fact that protein makes you fuller? So the only difference there is I'm saying, have you ever heard protein makes you fuller, as opposed to protein makes you fuller? And the difference straight away is like, you're not talking to them like you're a school teacher, which there's a model, psychology model called transaction analysis, which basically sort of splits it into adult, parent, child. And a lot of the way that we interact with people, it becomes very sort of like critical parent, they call it. And clients don't mean to do it, but they feel like you're making them wrong, you're talking down. And this is, by the way, this is not just like female weight loss clients. This is everyone. People like the best sports stars in the world, the best, they don't want someone to come in and just tell them what to do, because they will naturally almost push back. So again, it would be like, let's say they said Special K. I'd say, well, have you heard that protein's good for, keeps you full for longer? Most people know that. I have, yeah. Okay, cool. What's some protein stuff that we could do? And again, if they don't know that, I'll say, well, have you heard that, say, eggs are protein? Yeah, I have. How do you feel about having eggs? No, I don't like eggs. Or yogurt's protein. What do you think to that? Oh, yeah, I could have yogurts. Awesome. Do you want to do that? And what happens at this point is they feel like you're doing it together, and they also feel like in some way they've come up with the solution. And what I realized is that while some of my clients were like super wealthy, like really successful people, they liked that. They liked it. It was almost like sometimes a little bit childlike that, you know, that they came up, oh, I've done good, I've done well. And again, a lot of this is subconscious. And so you can just take most statements and change it into a question. By, did you know that you could take most questions and statements and change them into a question? I just found that made probably the biggest difference of all of it. So how you ask the questions is probably the second step. The first step is that just realize the power of asking questions. And this works in a lot of places, by the way. It's not just in coaching. It's, when you want good service, I bought my house and I got it for cheaper because I just asked the dude loads of questions.
Yeah. What you said there about when you ask someone to do something directly and they push back, reminds me of my missus. So I think I'll ask her more questions, I think.
Mate, I'm serious, man. It's like this. Eventually I got to a point where I knew I had to stop doing it. because my missus was like, stop with that question shit. I know what you're doing. But I think that must have lasted about 2-3 months of me just getting more of what I wanted. And it's like, not at her expense, but everyone knows if you have, or they might have heard it. It's like, you've got a child. I don't have kids, but it's like, get dressed. No. It's like, I don't know, you watch Super Nanny and they're like, right, which would you like to wear, the red or the blue? The child will probably just choose the one that they like the most. Awesome. How much easier is that going to be? So yeah, hugely in relationships, by the way.
Yeah, this is a great tip, and makes me think of coaching I've had when I've had a business coach ask me a question and made me do some of the work, but it definitely works. It's like you said, in so many contexts. Just jumping back a second, if this is something that you mainly think about, and maybe you could debunk this, which I'm sure you probably will, but can't you just select great clients who just do everything you say and just forget about those that don't, just to make this all a lot easier?
Do you know what? It's one of my favourite questions. And do you know Lyle McDonald?
Say that again. Oh yeah, Lyle McDonald. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I enjoy being in this group. Partly, I think his stuff is actually good. Like we were talking about, like he's very into the low volume and seems to be having a bit of a argument with some other people about like all of this science and stuff. So I kind of watch that and crack up. But like he's a bit combustible, let's say that. And he actually said something in his group. I was just like, he goes, the people who just think that they can just get the right clients, you're kidding yourself. And if we looked at it on a couple of ways, if we looked at it as like every marketer out there is like, I'll get you the high paying clients that do everything you say. And they sort of don't correlate, because what happened to me when I started charging a lot of money was that I was not the first choice. I was like the 6th, 7th, 8th choice, because they tried cheap first. Because most people will try cheap as opposed to, I'm going to do this properly. So the people that just find it easy to do, they don't necessarily just go and select like and being expensive doesn't necessarily link with being good. But if I had any facility, I want it to be perception of quality and quality. And when it is, I want to be charging certainly the going rate, and probably more than, there's a good couple of gyms in London that, they have a good reputation, but they're also very good marketers. And there's a reason they charge 30% more than everyone else. Now, the idea that can I not just attract clients that do what I say? Yes, but it will hit your bottom line massively. Because what started being said to me is like, I've tried everything else. And I started hearing this a lot on the phone. I was like, bit of it was like, I felt a bit under pressure sort of thing. But it's like, if it doesn't work with you, I don't know who it will work with. And part of that was me, my positioning and stuff like that. So I think there are places where that is more relevant, i.e. if you're working with, say, like people who get on stage, like athletes who almost, they're going to do it anyway. But then I would say with that, then you still have to, the best athletes in the world have performance coaches, because at that point, the 0.001 makes a huge difference. So I have trained clients in person that I wouldn't say they were performance coaches. I probably took them there. So the only place that I think those clients really exist where they just do everything you said. What are they really buying off you? They buy information, which your information is better than other people's, but it's a really small market. It's a really small market, and other people will do it for much cheaper. And again, getting into athletes and stuff like that is not, it's not always the easiest. But again, it's like these guys need the 0.01%. And so some stuff like called anchoring, which is kind of an NLP technique. Things like axiology, which is the study of values. Like, how do you eke out that extra bit of performance? And these guys, and I've done some of this with these guys, they love it. Visualizations before every workout. Like, I'm up in their face, like, but not just being a douchebag. Like, I'm actually talking to them and saying stuff that we've rehearsed before the sessions. And I don't know if do you know what anchoring is?
Remind me.
Yeah, it's just like, it's an NLP technique where you can use like touch, you can use certain words. I've used this with like female clients, and like, it sounds a bit dumb, but it's not, and they loved it. It was like, she wanted to be empowered. So every time she did sets of press ups, she would just spell the words out. And she just loved it, by the way. I mean, she came up with that. But again, I've had male clients where we've done, like, it's tapping, listening to certain music before you start, coffee, hood up, focus. This gets them in a zone which will make the difference.
Yeah. No, that's interesting stuff. It's good reason why. As you said there, if you want to work with, it sounds like if you want to work with clients who are where you have less refunds, generate more revenue, then you're going to have to learn how to coach those who are not just going to do what you say in a rational sense. Is that fair?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
because
fair
most
summary.
of it is. I'll give some advice on something that I've done with clients. It might sound really simple, and it is. As personal trainers and fitness guys, we probably recognise this, that you get clients and they don't actually understand what working hard is. They will always quit mentally before they quit physically. It's like the extension of that is, you hear this like mum that pulls a car off her son and shit like that. And that is relatively, I mean, that's scientifically valid, i.e. your body has these abilities that will stop you doing things to a certain level. And I'm sure someone should know the science for this.
Like central governor theory or something like that.
Oh, there you go. I knew someone would know. But I think if you take that back a bit, even like people, they don't really know what it means to work hard. So one of the things that I started incorporating with my more performance-based guys that I was doing online, I would get them to train 1 week, and then I'd go, right, I want you to go flat out, and we'd track it, and they'd come back. I'd be like, how hard did you work? And it'd be like, oh, it's like an 8 out of 10. It's normally at the beginning of the program. It's like, okay, I know they're not. I know they're working at like 5, but their perception is they're working at 8 because they actually don't really know what it really feels like to work at 8. They've never done that because they give up too quickly. And so then I'd go, right, I want you to beat it this week. And guys like targets. It's like, right, 5% this week. They're like, you up for it? Yeah. They'd go away, they'd come back. And then I'd say the second week, I'd be like, how hard did you work this week? And if they've said 8 the week before, they have no choice now but to say at least 8.5 because it can't be the same. So I'm like, okay, all right, 5% again. And they like the challenge. And then they'd go away, and it'd normally be the third week where I'd just say like, so what were you this week? And slowly the penny would drop because they'd go, I was a 9. And I was like, really? And they're like, no, actually, no, probably an 8. And I was like, so what were you last time and the time before? And they'll go, oh, it's probably really now. And now they know what it does feel like to work harder. And they'd be like, I was probably a 7. And sometimes, depending on who it is, I'd be like, dude, you're a 5. And they would realize this split that, you know what, I give up physically. And most people do. Most people give up physically before because they don't. I saw and I used to include this, a video of the guys who, Steve Redgrave, rowing on an ergo. I've never seen anything like it. like training. I don't know how they do that. Like, it was unreal. They know how to get to that real performance. Even me, I don't say even me knowing what I'm doing here, I still don't train anywhere near as hard as these people, obviously. So, yeah, I think there's loads of things that you can start learning about both ends of the scale with like getting in someone's brain.
Yeah. You know, you were talking earlier about sort of questions you would ask to help people, to find people's motivations and obviously help people ultimately get better results. I heard you talk about on a previous podcast a value assessment, which sounds like something you do at the early stages of a coaching client.
Yeah.
And so if we could talk about this in the context of what you teach your clients who are coaching their fitness clients, if that's not too confusing. What is the value assessment? What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, nice. So we do 12-week transformations. That's what I teach my guys to do. So we use, this is the system I kind of created over however many years. It's like we use coaching models. So there's a lot of habit-based stuff, which is like 2 to 3 things each week, this kind of thing, start slow, finish fast. But then what we do is we really get a little bit more depth, which is much more of like the actual behavior change stuff. So we have 6 or 7 coaching models that I've kind of swiped from different places, but also just made up my own, like from other bits that I've learned. And the first coaching model we do, and anyone listening can just Google this themselves, it's called the DeMartini Values Assessment. It's a very simple thing that you can do, and it almost seems too simple. And then often with coaches, when they're first getting into this, they don't know exactly what to do with it. That's often the challenge. But basically asks you like 13 questions. And then it lists like the most important things in your life for the person who's doing it, which sometimes doesn't give like this massive insight. Sometimes it does. Sometimes like it just reinforces what you already knew, or the person already knew. So I'll give you a couple of examples. If you're working with kind of high performance executives, almost always business career is going to be probably number 1 or number 2. And as a fit pro, you want to know that, because what I think a lot of fit pros do is they try and motivate their clients around stuff that's important to them, not what's important to their client, especially the ones that aren't as compliant as you'd hope. Because you getting excited about them benching more, yeah, they do care about that. But what they really care about is their work. Because a lot of the time, these guys, that's where they feel the most powerful. That's where they get most of their self-worth. They seem to be a leader there. So when you've done that, you get a good base of like the 3 things that are motivating them the most. And often there's like family in there, you know. So then the way that I would do that, and I'll give another example. One of my clients I had, he would always say to me that family was really important to him. But I don't think it was. And that sounds a bit harsh. I think really what was really the most important thing to him was his work, because I sort of actually got to know him quite well. And so it's a bit of an extension of doing the assessment, but where do I motivate him? Because if I'm trying to motivate him about being like this amazing, it's not that he doesn't want to be an amazing dad, he did, but really it was about work. So I can't, go on.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm just, well, maybe you were coming onto this, but I'm just really curious how you would leverage that finding. Like,
Sure.
Okay, so you want to be a high performance executive to actually drive the results that they pay you for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll give you a really, I thought this was hilarious. So I had a client and he was very wealthy. I've probably never met anyone as wealthy as his family, put it that way. And he was quite a good looking guy, didn't have a problem. Like he was young. So, you know, he wanted to be in good shape because of sort of girls, I guess. And, but he had a lot of money. So it's just like on the surface, it didn't matter. But what really mattered to him, this is kind of funny, hopefully I can say this. It basically it was all about when he actually got girls in bed, right? And this is a conversation that you have to read between the lines. And so one day I asked him to do press-ups and he couldn't do them. And I was a certain persona with him. I wouldn't do this with a lot of clients. But I kind of looked at him and I on purposely just went, dude, fuck me, that's pathetic. Can't even hold yourself up. And he looked at me and I was like, do you think it might be good if you could actually hold yourself up for more than 10 seconds? And he sort of got it. I was like, and maybe if you could do 100 press-ups, do you think that? And he was getting it. And he basically just went away, and I never had to tell him to do press-ups again. And he came back, and he was, again, I'm not going to say exactly what was being said, but he was saying how his performance had improved because of what we had been doing. And he's like, is that because of what we've been doing? And I just asked him, I was like, what do you think? He's like, yeah. Awesome. So that's quite an unusual situation, but to get in his head, I had to be very specific, because to find out what really matters to him, and that was probably doing a bit of an assessment, but reading between the lines. So like guy clients, for instance, or no, not just guys, but anyone, and they're saying to you, and it is that really is like they want to be a good role model to their kids. So like one of the next two coaching models we do is who are you and who do you want to be? You can Google this, and it's like it's called a grow model in personal development. But we kind of change the order a bit. It's like you put a description of the person you are now, and then you write a description of the person you want to be. So you ask them to write a description of the person that they would want to be, and you include in that something like, how would you want to be perceived by your son? And the likelihood is they're probably not going to say fat, overweight, says one thing, does another, eats like shit. They actually start to think, well, and people aren't stupid. They know that their actions speak louder than their words, for instance. But if you can get them to see that and say it to you, as opposed to lecturing them, they turn around and say, you know what, I've realized that whatever I say to him about healthy eating and, you know, being a positive person and that, my actions aren't the same, and I'm overweight and I eat shit and I say I'm going to get in shape and I don't. And they know all their behaviors. They're not stupid. They know all the behaviors that they're doing at that time is not helping them. So when you start linking it back to actually what really matters to them more than anything else, then it becomes kind of easy. Like they just don't eat shit. They just stop doing a lot of that kind of thing.
Interesting. That's a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, isn't it? Do what I do, not what I say.
Yeah, there's one that I really like. It's like, I can't remember now. What you say, what you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say.
I can't hear you. Yeah. Is that Ralph again, or is that someone else?
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. It is. And to be honest,
he has all the classics. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, and I think that I would link it back to what you said at the beginning about questions. They know this. If you just tell a client this, they will push back against you. Whereas if you ask them the right questions and you create the right frameworks, they take it on board.
Yeah, I think this is great. I completely agree. Whenever I work out, I have a 6-month-old son, and I always make sure I work out, especially during the lockdown, right? At home in front of him. So I'll be doing the chin-ups in front of him, and he's just looking up at me with pure curiosity, you know. And I know my fiance loves it because she knows that it's setting a great example for him. And I just absolutely 100% agree with that stuff. I think that's a great motivator for people. So I just wanted to clarify, just if you talk to a client and you discover that their work is super important to them, maybe they want to be successful or perceived a certain way as a leader, as someone who's inspiring in a business, for example, how would you say to them, so this is just me guessing based on what I'm learning from you. It's like, okay, so you say to the individual, okay, so that's really important to you. How do you think being in great shape, being lean, being strong is going to help you to attain that? And is that how you would get there in terms of getting them to habituate what you're trying to get them to do and associate that with what they really want?
Yeah, and I think it's good questions. I think if I go back to those two models, you know, first of all, the second one, and it's the same with the first one, but the second one, it's questions on one side, and then on the other one, it's a story. And the questions just say something like, how does your body look? How does your body perform? How do you eat? How do you exercise? So there's those very specific questions. And then on the back, you say, right, I want you to write a character description, almost like the version of you and you have this conversation. Usually I would choose something like 18 months for most people. They're not, depends how self-aware they are and what they've done, but around that time. And they'll normally answer a lot of that themselves. And again, it comes out. So a guy who is in that situation, let's say he's in his 40s. I mean, does he want to get ripped and have a six-pack? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But then it's like, is his integrity important to him? When you start getting down to things like integrity, that motivates people a lot, because these guys feel that that's important. I don't know, you might ask them, like, how do you think your staff perceive you? An example I've kind of used before with my guys in my program, it's like, imagine you were a speaker and one year you went to do this keynote speech, and then the next year you would put lots of weight back on, and you went to do a keynote speech. Are you telling me that that person wouldn't get double takes? They would. And they would notice it. And do they stop doing some things? And do they start and again, this is probably someone who's put weight on, but would you feel more congruent when you're talking about this? Because a lot of these guys, what they are is incredibly successful in almost every single area of their life. And often their success in that area is the reason why their health and their fitness has suffered, because they just see that all that matters is their success at work. Self-worth. You can get a bit deeper with this stuff as well. They get a lot of their self-esteem from that. They have always. And so it is almost the thing that sometimes hampers this other stuff. But then you start the conversation about, like, this is the version that you want to be. How do you feel? How do you feel about being someone who, and again, it depends on the individual. It's like, how if they're not doing what I say, for instance, one of my clients always used to turn up late for his sessions. And do I necessarily massively care? Yeah. But is it just a boundaries thing? And is it a place to show him he was overweight and he never gave himself boundaries? So he turned up, and one day I just sat him down. I was like, if our sessions are 1 o'clock, what time would you like to turn up? And he just started laughing. And I was like, no, I'm serious. What time do you want to turn up? And he said 1 o'clock. I was like, okay, what time are you going to turn up tomorrow then? 1 o'clock. He turned up at like 1:05, which, considering that he was never held accountable to anyone, and especially when you're that successful, there's no one that really does do it. Do I necessarily care? My job is to get him to lose weight. He needs to hold himself accountable to not eat shit all the time. So things like integrity start to become really important, especially when they've committed to saying, no, this is the person I want to be. Like, so one of the things that when I'm holding my clients accountable to selling in the right way with strength and certainty, it's like, do you want to be someone who says one thing on a sales call and then just doesn't follow through with it? Do you want to be that person or not? And they will normally say no. Okay. So again, it's a nice way to frame it with these guys. Like, they have to lead it. So you have to figure out, like, what is important to them. But again, normally things like integrity are massively important to these guys, and to most people as well, by the way.
Yeah, this is great. And, I'm sure the listeners have made mistakes. I just want everyone to know that I've made all these mistakes so many times. And I think a lot of this stuff just comes from practice. And, I'm learning as much as everyone else right now. In terms of the 12-week transformation that you used to do for your fitness clients, brides-to-be, things like that, I mean, now you're completely focused on the business coaching, right?
Not education, but yeah. Business.
Sorry, yeah. One of the things I absolutely loved about you spoke about before in your ebook is about just how little you have people do in the beginning. Could you talk about that for a moment, like what the first week might look like in terms of what the actions you have people take, and then we can kind of perhaps give a high-level view on what a 12-week transformation looks like for those clients when you were doing that kind of thing?
A lot of this was, like you said, to be honest, a lot of it was years of practice and learning and doing things stupidly, and then just I'll give you an example. like a client would come to me and I was like, okay, what exercise are you doing? And they'd be like, oh, I'm doing Zumba. And because I know best, I would tell them, don't do Zumba. It's stupid. I wouldn't literally say that. You need to strength train 3 times a week. This poor woman, it's like, how damaging is that to the person? So what I probably realized more after doing it is that most people who pay you money at the beginning, and this includes people, by the way, who are uber successful executives, all of this kind of stuff, entrepreneurs, like they have very, very low, let's say self-esteem, but we could say self-confidence in this area, definitely. Now, it often carries over into other things for some people. So they turn up to your door week one. They failed so many times. They're paying you the money, especially if it's good money, because they can't do it on their own. You'd probably ask them on the sales call, tell me all the things that you've tried in the past that didn't work. They probably told you a list of 6 things. And then week one, you turn around and give them like this 50-page booklet. And what Fit Pros are very not good at, because I wasn't as well, is empathy. And especially if you've never been overweight yourself. Because I would also look at a lot of Fit Pros that I start working with, and I could easily go to them, what's the matter with you? You can't fucking set up an email like platform. Are you stupid? Easy for me, but it's foreign to them. And the hedge fund manager that I used to work with could have turned around to me and said, well, you're dumb. You don't earn millions of pounds like I do. It's like, it's just not what I'm good at. So the first thing in that first week, and I realized this afterwards more than anything else, is I just want the person to turn up for the second week having been successful. I almost, and I'm slightly being a little bit facetious here, I almost don't care what that first week was. I just want them to turn up and have a tick. Because if we did go a little bit deeper about what an actual 12-week transformation does, one of the most important things that you do in that is you change something called their self-image, because fat people see themselves as fat, and you need to change that bit by bit for them to be able to actually, it's like people who win the lottery. There's a lot of research that most of them, or a big amount of them, just give the money away in some ways. Yeah. They end up poor again because their self-image is someone who's just poor. They don't probably even know this, and I probably wouldn't have known this about fitness. So I am, through the whole 12 weeks, trying to change their self-image, and there's certainly ways to do that. And the first thing in the first week is that they turn up and I say, tell me some good stuff for this week. And they're like, I did it. And often, like, just and again, like, you might get someone who's like runs a big company, and it's almost like childlike. You've just set them 3 goals, and most of the time, it depends what the client is and what their goals are. Most of the time, I usually work on nutrition, because that's where you're going to have the biggest, and we're talking about weight loss transformations here. You're going to have a much bigger effect over what they're doing. And, and we always work on process goals in the first week. It's like, we're not looking for an outcome of like a weight loss. We're saying, like, when I don't say it, I ask them, so they decide. But generally it's like, I'm going to exercise 3 times this week. So first week is just 3 goals that are almost 99% of the time they will be able to complete them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I got an example that you shared on another podcast here where you said to one client, I think you said walk around the park twice, like in a week, 2 liters of water daily, and then change breakfast. That was it. This is really powerful because, like you say, your goal is not to get them to do the perfect program from day one. It's just to get them to week 2. And I think that a lot of my audience do the opposite. Some of them can be very, I want to say there are some that are dogmatic about training, and dogmatic's the wrong word. We know, like you said there, that probably resistance training, when it comes to exercise, the evidence supports that that's probably the most productive thing you can do in terms of the most benefits. But yeah, trying to get someone who's never done it before to then do it in week 1 is probably a lot to ask. Obviously, the kind of challenge though is you do want them to do that because you know it will yield greater gains.
Yep.
So with that said, could you just take us through, again, I don't expect you to go through like every little detail of the 12 weeks, but just kind of give us more commentary on what 12 weeks might look like.
So I massively agree. And what I think I used to do is I used to be a little bit too facetious about like that comment about what I get them to do in the week one. A lot of that is like, you know, what do you want to do? How many times are you going to work out? What do you enjoy? If they say, I enjoy strength training, awesome. Do you know what you're doing? I'm going to go to the gym. Fantastic. I love squatting. Awesome. Do you know how to squat? Yeah. I mean, you know, and again, we need to make sure that there's the technique and all that. But yeah, I've been training for 6 years. I used to be an athlete. I've just put loads of weight on. Cool. And I used to be a little bit too facetious about it because it was like, but what I don't think I put across is like, I've taken clients that had sat on their sofa for the last 3 years. It's not because I'm amazing. It's just because I learned some of this stuff. And by the end of the 12 weeks, they were doing shit that a person getting on stage was doing. And I think a lot of the kind of evidence-based, you know, I'm really a technical trainer. The reality of the situation is, especially if they're new, but even if they're not, your clients are usually lying to you. And they're not usually actually doing what you've asked them to do. And they won't tell you. And if they're not losing weight or they're not getting progression, it's nothing to do with what I used to think it was to do. It's just they're lying to you. And so the ones that got good results, well, they must be doing everything I said. No, they probably weren't. So I could have actually got them better results. So within the 12-week blueprint, we split it into 3 periods. It's the first 2 weeks is what we call diagnostic. So all I care about in that 2 weeks is I need to understand my clients and I give them like simple 2 to 3 things to do. And it's like going to a doctor's and it's like they would say like prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. I'm not at that point necessarily interested in the intricacies of all the complex training they do, because for our stuff, what we do is weight loss transformations. It's not normally the training that you have the biggest leverage at first about. And so if they're doing their training well, I sometimes just leave it there. If they're training properly and they're training 4 times a week and they're training with any sort of intensity, yet they're 3 stone overweight, like it's obvious what the problem is. They just eat shit or too much of it. So the first 2 weeks is very much diagnostic. Then we have what's called a foundation phase, which is we start to change some things about self-image. We start to make them feel more confident. Tell a lot of clients to just go and train in the gym. They won't do it. Ask someone, for instance, to do before photos, and they come back to you and they say, I was just too busy. They weren't too busy. They hate themselves enough that they can't do it, and yet they won't tell you. And then you'll get angry at them because you think they're just being lazy, and then you end up having an argument and they cancel, or you just your relationship is not good. So the foundation is looking at sort of getting them confident. So if I had a client, and let's use a woman for example, yes, I want to get them in the gym and I will do, but the first thing that I might do when I'm programming for them is better to be effective than white. I'm not going to do supersets of squat and seated row. Not many women are going to go into a gym and just dominate a gym and sort of, I'm using the squat rack, and then swap back and forth. So what I would probably do is get them a little workout. I don't mean to be patronizing, but I'd get them a workout that they could do with the same dumbbell with a step in the corner of a gym. And I would actually talk them through it. Tell me about your gym. Because a lot of them wouldn't do anything but cardio. I'd even get them to take a photo of what's there. And I'd probably then just get them to do a workout for 2 weeks or a week. And they'll come back and go, that was really, because women and men as well, by the way, it depends where they are. They don't feel confident enough to do shit like that. And they often won't tell you because they feel dumb. So then the foundation is, as you start seeing them gaining confidence in lots of things, then the last 5 weeks is what we call acceleration. That is the place where when you've built confidence, for instance, if we're doing MyFitnessPal, the way that we incorporate MyFitnessPal is the first week, which is normally week 3, in the foundation phase. Just download MyFitnessPal this week, and that's it. Nothing more than that. Not here's your macros. It's literally download MyFitnessPal.
But use it as well, right?
No, just download it.
Right.
That's all I care about. Now, that might seem retarded to someone, but when you're someone who has zero self-confidence in all of these areas, even just that. Now, what happens, by the way, is they do often just start playing around with it. So then the second week,
they want to almost impress you, don't they, when they come to that next call?
And again, especially when like you've created an environment, it's kind of it is definitely more like a feminine energy kind of coaching, which you have to, like a trust environment, a vulnerability and openness to tell you the stuff that they would like to tell someone, but they can't because they think you're going to judge them. So week after that, I just ask them to plug in their breakfast. That's it. Because then what it does is, instead of MyFitnessPal being a 14-hour thing that they will forget about and they won't do it, and then they'll beat themselves up and they'll feel they'll let you down, and they'll probably lie, and they'll come back with their MyFitnessPal and be like, they told me that they're eating 500 calories less than they're meant to be. They're lying. So what it does is it brings a MyFitnessPal, and it's a 20-minute job every morning. That's it. Not a 14-hour job. They have to think about it. But it builds confidence. So then the next week, I'm like, okay, how are you feeling about that? Oh man, I always thought it was so much harder than it is. And I'm like, bingo. Okay, what do you want to do next? How about we do, I'd either choose like include lunch, but sometimes it'd be like, how confident, let's do the whole day. I'm still not programming, by the way, at this point. I'm still not telling them eat a certain amount, but they're not stupid. They don't eat 3,000 calories. And they probably won't they probably won't eat the donut because they know they have to put it in. And then the next week is when I say, okay, we're going to start doing 1,500 calories. How do you feel about that? And I've built confidence over 3 weeks. So when we do get to the acceleration phase, I am actually program designing macros for some Doris who's sat on the sofa for forever, has never even used it. And I know with all the stuff I learned about like actual deep nutrition, I actually know they're doing it. Or not, by the way, because if they're not, they'll at least they'll feel they can tell me. And I had a female client and she was like, this was back in the Poliquin days a little bit. She was like, meeting nuts for breakfast, AM cardio, fasted, training 5 times a week. A lot of the mindset stuff we talked about, like really and this was a 25-year-old girl who had just not really trained in her life. And that was one of the things that I found really fun about it, is that you can actually be that person who's really knowledgeable and your clients actually do it. And you know they're doing it because they'll tell you if they're not. And I think most fit pros, most of our clients just lie to us.
Okay. Awesome. So did you touch on the acceleration phase, or is that the next part of the?
Well, acceleration is just like, it's almost like, again, if I could visualize it, I'd sort of show you. But we also, one of the things that I introduced is like through the 12 weeks, we have checkpoints. And the reason checkpoints are really good is because the first checkpoint is the person is training 3 times a week for 45 minutes. I know I've got 4 weeks to build something. And the reason I did it is because people were like, my clients who are fit pros are like, well, what happens if like they start at different places? And I was like, yeah, they do, don't they? So I realized that as long as I could get someone to train 3 times a week for 45 minutes by week 4, I've got 8 weeks to get them to train, 4 times a week for 60 minutes, for instance. And if they want to do fucking cardio in the morning as well, happy days. I've got enough time, no rush. And so there's also a checkpoint towards the end, which is near the acceleration phase, which is where you have a conversation with the client and say, look, we're on track for your original goal. What do you want to do at this point? We've got choices. We can either get you doing things that you would not want to do for the long term. And I make it very clear, this is not a lifestyle. This is not something that you should think you can do forever, but it's going to get us the best results and the most amount of weight loss in this 12 weeks. Or are you just happy with And again, what one of the things that often gets said is they're like, I can't believe this was so easy. So if they say that sort of thing about week 6 or 7, sometimes what they say is like, you know what, I'm happy with not having to do all the extra stuff. I like the fact that I can have a few extra calories at the weekend. I want to still be able to drink wine. I don't want to live like a hermit. And you're like, fine. And they're happy at the 1.5, 2 pounds a week. The last checkpoint is like the last 4 weeks. Like, what do you want to do? And they're the ones, especially guys, by the way, but some women as well. That's when you can literally week by week, you just start adding new stuff in. So I'll probably add steps in. It's like, let's track your steps. I'll probably add AM cardio in. I will start reducing calories to a point where, and do you know Martin McDonald?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, I learned a lot from him, even after I was really into the coaching. And one of the things he says is like, you can diet people a lot more aggressive than most fit pros think. And so I will have people on those last few weeks and we'll talk about it, but we can take another 200 calories out. It's not going to make you feel great. What do you want to do? And as long as and the conversation normally revolves around, as long as this doesn't affect your energy, your work, when I diet aggressively, it does a bit, but I can get away with it.
I can imagine that being quite effective with like a bride-to-be who's absolutely desperate to look their best on in their eyes, the most important day of their life, right? They're prepared to go through that anguish.
I wouldn't do it again because it's just not where I am, like as in work with them. One of the reasons I did look quite good at first with them is, so if you imagine a bodybuilder who gets on stage, they'll do whatever you say. And I mean, I've not worked with them, but this is what I imagine. But in the end, they could cancel. They could do another show. They could do it next year. It's like, no bride wants to think, well, if this doesn't go well, i.e. my diet, then I'll just do it next time. This is that important to them. So there's a few options for them. Either literally they will just starve themselves to death and do some cabbage diet, or you work with them and you actually take care of them. But towards the end, do you want to take another 200 calories out? Yes. It will make you feel like this. How are you feeling about that? Fine. You're gonna have to get up an hour earlier to do cardio. Yep. And they'll keep losing. I think one of the things that happens when you follow those sort of 3 periods is that you generally see quite a consistent weight loss, because you can see weight loss at the beginning just from really simple changes. Then a lot of fit pros think that things like, it's a lot to do with metabolism and stuff or whatever, especially in the old days, you too low calories and shit like that. But what it is often actually is more of like a pain to pleasure. So if you look at like a lot of basic psychology motivation, they'll say you move away from pain towards pleasure. So what does usually actually happen in the middle is that the person doesn't feel the pain of being 3 stone overweight. They've lost a stone and they actually feel a little bit better about themselves, which is nice because that's what you want to do with them. And then their motivation just weans a little bit and they just have a little bit of a chip here, and then they don't put it in MyFitnessPal. And all these things happen where it's nothing to do with it is to do with their intake of food, but it's driven by their motivation. So there's all these kind of things that you figure out along the way of like working with clients, that it was nothing to do with the fact that, my program design needed to change even. It's just they weren't following it because, again, as a coach, when you start to learn this stuff, you can use questions to facilitate them telling you, yeah, you know what? And they'll laugh normally. Yeah, you know what? I didn't put the coffee in there or the latte or whatever. So when you've got like those 3 sort of periods, you get, especially if you kind of done it a few times, you almost get like a very consistent weight loss throughout. And towards the acceleration phase, like, of course, their set point of calories is going to change. They've lost weight. So, you do need to do something program designed to to take that into consideration. But you can just add bit, and you tend to get like and it's not totally like that, but it's around £2 a week, pound and a half.
I think it's maybe important to say a couple of things at this point. Please, if you're listening to this and you're interested in working with Tim or looking at what Tim's got to offer, then stay to the end, because we will talk about that and list that in the show notes for this over at episode 275 on highintensitybusiness.com. But I'm just also thinking, you talked there, Tim, about maybe some of your philosophy around training and diet, but I'm guessing that your system is kind of adaptable. So if someone's got if they're like a keto person or a carnivore person, or they like doing X strength training regimen, then they just really need to take the principles and implement their own kind of philosophy on top of it, which I think, and again, this is correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a good thing, because it kind of makes you unique as well, makes you stand out. It becomes your way of doing things. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like we kind of came up with the name, like Blueprint. It could have been Skeleton. For exact, and to be honest, this was a business conversation as well. Like, I just built this for myself, and I came up with most of this just from doing it. And then when I actually started needing to teach it to people, especially in quite a systemized way, all of these things, like, they kind of emerged with, this is the problem, how do we solve that problem? So the even the periods, it was much based around like, okay, we need to teach clients that they don't overwhelm their clients in the first 2 weeks, and that they do get to geek out at the end at some point. And one of the things that was there is like, do we want to be people who tell someone how to train their clients and their nutritional theories? And the problem is, like, it would be a bit like telling someone in a way like, actually, no, you need to change, you're Protestant. No, you have to be a Catholic now. It's like, let's not get into that battle. We didn't want to. So it's like, what happens if we get someone who's a vegan coach? To just not accept them? I don't know, you kind of laugh at them, but like, like, it's like, and what happens if you get someone who is a keto guy? Or what happens if you get someone who's really into CrossFit? So we had to create everything on like a principle-based level. It's like, you can slot whatever you want. There are a few things that we do teach, but again, it's like, some of it is my opinion, and I make it very clear. We believe in the law of thermodynamics. I didn't used to a certain extent. Like, I went down the road of like, it doesn't matter, but I did go down that route, shamelessly. So we do talk about like my Fitness Pal, for instance, the coaching approach to using it. They don't have to use that. It's like, you can get someone to change 2 to 3. I'm literally freestyling it, but let's say you were a vegan coach and you were working with people and they were struggling with becoming vegan. You can probably just get them to tweak a little bit each week. You'll probably find out, like, why is this important to them? Like, why do they really want to? Because I don't know, I was a vegetarian, but like I'm sure there's some battles, and again, I'm freestyling here, like wanting to go back to that. I don't know, if you're a keto person, I guess the keto thing's slightly different because you want to get them in ketosis straight away. I guess that's the conversation they'd need to have them with themselves, i.e. the clients, and we would as well. Are you better off getting someone in keto after, say, 3 weeks? And what I would say, by the way, is some of this comes back to a business model as well. So when we teach 12-week blueprint, it is a system to create transformation, but it's also a business model. So one of the things that changes when you sell 12-week transformations is that the person pays up front for them. So they are committed to working with you for 12 weeks. And what it does is it does allow you a little bit of leeway with clients being committed for the whole 3 months, the whole 12 weeks. You've not got that reselling them at week 4. So what that tends to do is it allows, I used to like getting clients to lose 5 pounds in week 1. And there is some sort of studies around like that what you get them to lose in week one is fundamental to their outcomes overall. So in the old days when I used to do the Poliquin meat and nuts, green veg thing, you know, I get the reason for it. And I don't think that many people do it anymore. But you could still put that in. You might just decide, you know what, they're going to go in ketosis in week 3. Still got 10 weeks. You know, maybe I just bring it down. And to be honest, maybe they don't feel as shit. And again, if I go back to what I was saying there, you can do it at week 3 because they paid you for the whole thing and they're committed to the whole thing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that was really smart that you made it adaptable to people's own eating training philosophy so they can just sort of lay that on top. It's great actually. You've covered like a lot of follow-ups I had with regard to how to get people to stick to these things, as you said there. Before we wrap up and just get your details, Tim, I liked this quote I heard, which I wanted to talk about briefly, because I think you have given us, my listeners, a really good kind of template on how to coach clients effectively. One of the things you said on a podcast was how, trainers, there's a one of the problems in the fitness industry is a lot of people in fitness hate sales, and you and I love sales, right? I come from a sales background myself, and I was uncomfortable selling in the beginning, but then when I realized what selling is, it's just helping people solve problems and actually making people feel pretty good. It takes the kind of discomfort out of it a little bit for me. And one of the things you said is how sales persuasion is all one long continuum. And it starts right at the beginning when you sell a client on this program. Because, and I think you talked about this in your ebook, it's like when they put down 12K or 6K or whatever it is for a 12-week program, a big part of them achieving that result is putting down that money and making that investment in themselves. Can you just speak on that for a bit and how you teach that kind of to your clients?
Yeah, and I one of the things that I remember learning from my first mentor is like the transformation happens in the sales call, and I think what I've seen from the fitness industry, this is used to be what was peddled out. It was like you have to charge real top money because it has to be painful enough for the fitness client to follow it. So a lot of the mentors that sort of do a little bit, I guess, some of what we do, they're like, go and charge your clients $2,000. And the reason that they'll give for it is like, you'll have more committed clients and, they've got skin in the game, which I do agree with to a certain extent. But what I've realized now from actually giving everything and the actual system to deliver is, yes, you do need to charge what you're worth. But when you do know what you're doing, like someone coming in and charging 1,200 quid is enough. And I'm not judging on where people charge, but it's enough combined with actually then giving them a system that works. I think what used to happen is like when you give someone a program and you charge them $2,000, they'll fucking just figure it out themselves, which I didn't particularly like. So I think that the transformation happens in the sales call. Yes, they've got skin in the game, but you also need to make sure that you deliver on the value of that. And if you can get that across to, say, someone who doesn't like sales, I think one of the reasons why our guys make sales very, very quickly is because they feel in integrity. So like you said, like sales is a really, it's very deep, like what you're actually trying to do with someone when you teach this stuff. Because psychologically, we've got, the example I'd always use is like you walk down High Street in whatever town you're in, or Baker Street, I used to do it in London, and you see those guys with clipboards and you automatically...
Hey, those guys.
Yeah, exactly. You automatically cross the road or don't catch their view. And it's like, if you actually thought about what's happening, what they're doing is selling you stuff, which is why you avoid them. But if you actually went up and said, what are you collecting money for? And they said, oh, we're collecting it for children in the third world who go blind, and all they need is this net. And if you give us 50p, one child wouldn't be blind. I'm like, shit, man, maybe I won't drink my coffee today and I'll give them my money. But we're so ingrained that sales is bad that it's almost like subconsciously something that we can't control. And I think there's a study which they ask, what's the word when we say sales? What's the first word that comes to mind? 19 of them are bad.
Wow.
So, car salesman.
Yeah, used car salesman.
And it's like, this is what people, and part of it is also
cold calling.
So one of the things you said about like persuasion, you could also say any relationship building is in some way around persuasion. Networking events, dating, all of these things, that it's about creating rapport and a relationship with someone. So you can get people that are really horrendously icky, that walk around a club pissed out of their face, like, and it's just horrible watching them. And you're like, whereas you can get people that are just friendly, and whether you say good at it or whatever, it's like, so you can be that, whichever version you decide. You can be the person who's just horrendous at sales, and then normally the people that are the worst are the people that hate it so much, but they make themselves do it, and they look needy as fuck. Or you can reframe the whole thing at the beginning to go, this in the end is the only way that, not the only way, for the vast majority of people that are coming to you, they are not going to get their problem solved if they don't get your help, because the reality of the situation is they don't. So, like you said, it's service, and it's very much a thing that you need to undo in people's minds. And a lot of people who say, like, one of the things they do in dating, I don't know if you know much about this, they'll take guys out on a night out, and they'll basically just push them into a group of girls. Some dude who lives in his basement, go and talk to them. It's like, that is traumatic. Like, please don't do that. And one of the other ways of doing it is go up to a granny and say, how's your day? And then tomorrow, ask for directions. And then the next day, just bit by bit, you just get used to it. And again, it's the reframing. A lot of men don't like talking to women because there's all these, it's actually a lot of it psychological. So when you reframe what sales means, and they know that they are going to serve their clients and they've got what they need to step up and serve them, it becomes much easier to ask for the money. I mean, much easier. And then you can get into some of the real nuance of sales, and
especially when you realize that it's risk for you as well. You know, like you're by taking a large amount of money, it's like, well, if you're responsible for delivering a certain amount of value, there's risk on your side in terms of your time. And I think that also, if you understand your value and how you could be using that time in other ways, then you don't feel bad about it either. It's another way of reframing it. And maybe some of that comes with experience. But no, go ahead.
Yeah, nice. I like it. And I think you're right. I think there's to be honest, I think the fitness industry suffers from a massive amount of issues with self-esteem. And I don't mean just individuals. I don't mean individuals. I just mean as a whole. Like, if you look at what a body transformation really does for someone, man, you really change their perspective on a lot of things. It's like the plastic surgery industry who does a tit job and charge $7,000 for it. They don't sit there and, oh my God, like, it's like, this is how much it is. And then I don't know what their sales process is like, but it's probably, I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing it, but like, what do I think that is better value for someone who wants to improve so many facets about themselves? Like, do a body transformation or get your tits done. Like, I'm not judging anyone that does, but it's like, they don't have a problem with selling $6,000 food job. It's like, why should we have a problem charging 1,200 quid for a 12-week program? We shouldn't. Yeah. And I think the fitness industry just suffers from it massively for some reason.
Yeah. This is gold. And this entire podcast was just fascinating, Tim. I really appreciate it. I think I've found it myself really useful. I know a lot of my listeners will. One thing I wanted to mention, you're a big fan of Influence by Robert Cialdini. I think that's a great book for people to read after this if they want to really hone the 6 principles of persuasion. I just want to add that on in case we forgot. What's the best way for my listeners to find out more about you and learn about your programs?
We founded the Institute for Fitness Behavioural Change. So it's not a program. It's just kind of places that someone can come and hang out. We've got a Facebook group. We put a lot of content in there. I'm in there quite a lot, like literally every day, and my business partner, Phil. So it's the Institute of Fitness Behaviour Change. I mean, you can put a link to it, but it is literally facebook.com/the Institute of Fitness Behaviour Change. And then my Facebook is facebook.com/, I think it's Tim Drummond com, like COM. So you can add me on Facebook as well. That's probably the best place. That's where we hang out the most, or I hang out the most.
Yeah, and if you're connected with me on Facebook, obviously I'm open to connections. I'm Lawrence Neal on Facebook, and if you go to my wall, you can see. If you can't find your account, you can see it there, because we recently did a little collaboration there. Excellent. Well, Tim, look, I again really appreciate your time. This has been great. For everyone listening, to find the blog post for this episode and download the PDF transcript, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 275. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.